Good morning and welcome to Saturday special of Dr. Lamba's Awakening course. When I woke up in the morning and I looked at the Facebook, I found a comment or a question from one of very close friends, Shane Hill. And he asked my opinion about the possibility of civil war in USA in case President Trump is not able to succeed in his attempt to unseat media acclaimed elected President Joe Biden. And I refer to the fact that the probability and the possibility might be there of a coup. And if I look at the atmosphere is rife with the rumors that the president might attempt a coup. But why should he attempt a coup? He has nowhere till now stated that he would take extraordinary measures beyond the pale of law. He has nowhere stated that he'll violate the Constitution of USA. He has been adopting all legitimate steps, and none of the steps that he has taken, they might not have been taken earlier, yes. But the fact that nobody earlier took the steps does not mean that they are illegal steps. In my article the other day, I had mentioned very clearly that voter fraud in USA is not a new phenomenon. As a matter of fact, the civil war was a result of voter fraud. Now, coming to the possibility of a coup in USA, probabilities are always there. In politics, nothing is laid down in stone, and there is no oracle that this cannot happen. If civil war could happen, could coup is possible. And similarly, Mr. Hill's second part was, would there be civil war? Civil war can be of two shapes. One is the rioting, the other is when the army and the paramilitary forces join hands and start fighting each other. As a matter of fact, there is not much of a difference between a coup and a civil war. The only difference would be that in a coup, uh, the military might not fight with the people. And history shows that the coup fails or succeeds. And there are three parameters which decide the success of any coup anywhere in the world. First, of course, is the media. And media in USA is heavily tilted against Trump. The second is the military sport. Now, military sport is of two levels. One is at the lower level, the other is at the top echelon. The top echelon is contaminated to a great extent by the liberal and the democratic ideas. The lower level of military is definitely more enamored of Trump because he's the first president since Eisenhower who did not engage in a war abroad. He has been bringing troops back home. He has been responsible saving lives. So there is a conflict at the higher level and the lower level. Then the international backers, seizers of the power. Would he get the international backing? Yes and no. The countries which have still not decided, calculated Joe Biden, like Russia, like China, like Mexico, would not oppose him. And the countries like Pakistan, Germany, France, who oppose Trump per se, their impact is minimal. If Trump had the audacity to walk out from the Human Rights Commission, from the WTO, from WHO, without caring for the carping people, he can very well go ahead. And then it's not only Trump who is involved, it is the people. And it's quite possible that even if there's no coup, even if there's no civil war, there might be riots. Now, you might be thinking that how is it possible that these three are there? Historically, if we say there have been two coups in one country, where the coups normally don't take place. The leadership is so firmly entrenched. Both these coups took place in Russia. If you remember in 1991, the defection of a few battalions, just a few battalions, led to the whole division switching sides. So it was the lower junior military people who initiated the process, and then the Kawa became a huge military march. And what was required was a sufficient legal pretext to give the coup an air of legitimacy. And here, the legal pretext is there that the voter fraud has been there. Now, at that time, the Russian constitution in 93 was very nebulous. And in 93, it let Yeltsin get away with dissolving the parliament, and the Gang of Eight was unable to provide sufficient legal pretext to gain power. So that failed. So in 91, the coup was successful. In 93, it failed. And let's not forget, it's not only the military, it's not only the power, it's the control of the narrative. Is a key factor is the control of narrative, how you present things. The ability of the people to send and broadcast a message. Now, the media is definitely against Trump, but if he takes extraordinary powers, invokes the emergency powers, and sends his people to take over the media, which has been done earlier in many cases. In one case, the anchors were removed forcibly by the military, and the military officials started anchoring the shows. And again, to the classic case of 91 Russian coup, the opposition to the coup was widespread, and independent media carried stark images of tanks on the streets of Moscow. So that was failing. But in 93, crowds turned out to support parliament and were initially only faced by the police. As cameras began to focus on neo-Nazi thugs and Russian ultranationalists that made up the legislature supporters, Yeltsin was able to paint all this on the opponents as extremists, and he was successful. And then, the ability of the opponents to unify is a major factor that can make the coup a success or a failure. As a matter of fact, there's then, recognition, but in USA case, recognition is not a factor. USA politically, economically is at that state that whosoever controls the White House would get recognition from the world over, barring a few players like Iran. And then the Middle East is not going to oppose Trump. Let's be very clear. his capability in introducing peace over there has been instrumental, and the recent killing in August of Al Qaeda's chief is another feather in his crown. Now, as the media declared defeated US President Trump, his attempts to cling onto power, if he loses the election, the fears are there. But then those are not going to be there for two reasons. A, the media is not going to support him till he takes the extraordinary measures, extreme measures, which he has not shown any evidence of doing so. In 91, the last ditch attempt to stop the reforms that led to the collapse of USSR. The second in 93, the democratically elected President Yeltsin used military force to stop an, an effort to impeach him and try to impose a super presidential rule. So, if you are not familiar with the outline of both events, the first event, August 91, actually it was August 19th of 91, eight senior ministers, calling themselves the State Committee on the State of Emergency, seized power. And later on they came to be called Gang of Eight. They include the Vice President of the Soviet Union, the Minister of Defense, and the head of KGB. And then they imprisoned Michael Gorbachev in his home. Gorbachev refused the pressure to resign, and Yeltsin came to his rescue and denounced the coup. And the Gang of Eight had to close all non-state broadcast networks. But Eco Moscow, an independent radio station, remained on air. And that changed the whole narrative. And the coup failed miserably. In 93, it was different. The whole thing was different, and the coup was successful. As a matter of fact, if we look at those two coups as the best possible case studies where within a span of 2 years, one coup was successful, the other failed, we see that the three factors, narrative, military, and international recognition, played a major role. Here, the role would be only of two factors, narrative and military. The action of President Trump in removing Defense Secretary has been thought to be the same as the first step towards taking a coup, but then I don't feel it's going to happen. Now, let's come to the basic factor. Politics is a dicey game. A thing may be possible but may not be probable, and it may be probable but may not be possible. Any civil war, a coup would be there if it's both possible and probable. And I don't think that's going to happen. Possibility of civil war is there, but the probability is not, because the division of the voters in the states is not clearly demarcated. In many cases, a case of Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Riotings, as we have seen recently in the case of Antifa and Black Lives Matter, yes, they are possible. There might be a widespread rioting, and that might result in the army coming up to control and then either supporting Biden or Trump in the White House. That possibility is there. But civil war, where the army divides into two groups and fights each other, that possibility I don't see. There are some people who worried about the conservative majority in the US Supreme Court. But it's very unlikely that a voter fraud case that has been dismissed due to lack of evidence would even find a way to the Supreme Court. And the Constitution is unambiguous, it's very clear. Trump will cease being president on January 20th midday, provided Supreme Court doesn't intervene, or on December 15th, the states are not able to certify the electors, or on January 3, the House of Representatives is not able to take a decision. So it will be indecisiveness of the Congress, which might result in civil disturbance. But the possibility, as I said, is very low. The fraud allegations are helping create a narrative for his polling that's undeniable. But the narrative is not controlled. Polling is mixed, and there is no majority, even a significant plurality for Trump's ideas. The opposition to Trump is divided over ideological and policy lines. Let's be clear. Even Democratic Party is not united. The Gang of Four is terribly, terribly ultra left. And most of the Democrats are not that. So, since they are ideological divided, they may not be able to represent a solid flanks. As I said earlier, massive protests would erupt definitely, and they'll erupt in all major cities, as they did this summer over Black Lives Matter and Antifa. Would they result in civil war? Is a matter of conjecture. Possible, but not probable. It is unlikely that though Biden has received acknowledgement, he would have sufficient courage to lead people in case of civil war. And it's quite possible that in case there is civil disturbance, civil war, he might develop cold feet. He might resemble the Gang of Eight. And here's again a Gang of Four plus Biden and Elizabeth Warren and Pelosi. And of course, Chuck Schumer. The Gang of Eight is here also. Would they meet the same fate as the coup leaders in 91 met? Same-faced withdrawal? Or would the country be held in a turmoil? These are all issues which are a very nebulous form, but the danger point is there. One spark can ignite the whole thing, and it may be a disaster for the country. But then, would it really be a disaster? That is yet to be thought of. It may not be. A new country might be born. A phoenix always rises from the ashes. One thing is sure, that Trump may go, but Trumpism would live forever, as I said in my article the other day. Thank you.